Hi, my name is Amber. Welcome back to my channel, Books and Beaches. So, although we are already over halfway through the month of November, I made sure that, or I shouldn't say I made sure, but I wanted to make sure, there we go, that I shared some of my favorite nonfiction reads with you because I know a lot of people celebrate Nonfiction November, and I am sure there is an official, readathon somewhere, and I will try to find it and link it below if I can. But I know for a lot of people, their goal is to just read at least something nonfiction in the month of November, because, the alliteration in the month. But I have actually been really good at reading some nonfiction this month. Plus, I have read some amazing nonfiction books in the past. So some of these, actually most of these, I have probably already mentioned on my channel at some point, either in a wrap-up or other nonfiction videos that I've done. But I just wanted to make sure that I give you a little bit of my updated list and just, another push for some of the other ones I've already talked about. But the one thing I will say is this is a very generic, general nonfiction list. This will include memoirs. I don't think I have any biographies on here, but I know nonfiction has its own subgenres, but for me, these are all just under the, larger umbrella of nonfiction. So without further ado, and one thing I will say too, most of these I probably listen to on audio. I think nonfiction is a great place to have the audiobook most of the time, if at all possible, because it is read by the person themselves, I suppose, especially when it comes to memoirs. But I think it definitely keeps me in this person's world, or what the story is about. In one case, it's like a full cast audio, and I just find them so much more immersive. So there's that. All right, so the nonfiction books that I have picked up recently, and unfortunately a few of these I do own, but I think I have them all lent out right now. And the first two are the books that we chose to focus on for our book club this month. And you could either read both, one, the other. I think Lindsay from Lindsay's Little Library and I were the only ones that actually read both of them. But anyways, the first was The Let Them Theory, and this is by Mel Robbins. Now, I had not listened to any of Mel Robbins' podcasts before, although I heard they're really, really good. And this theory seems so simple. It's a theory of let them. And it was a book that I think hit home because I'm a very type A person. I can be very anxious and, constantly worried about probably too much about what other people are thinking. And so I think, this book talks about you need to let other people be and do what other people are going to do and not, internalize that, take that. And so there were so many parts of this book that I was like, yep, I do that, or yes, I do this. And so I really enjoyed listening to it. I think the one thing that was really hard about listening to this one, because Mel Robbins reads it, was she doesn't directly follow her text that she's written. And so I think in most cases, we're so used to, if you're going to tandem read something, which I wanted to because she does have reference photos and things in this, it was harder to follow along because in moments that she would paraphrase or kind of extend, and if I would lose my place because I would, go about listening and then come back to the book, it was hard for me to find where I was. But so that would be the one critique. And I find nonfiction one of those things that's really hard to rate necessarily, especially when you are reading, self-help or memoirs. But I did enjoy this one. There were a few things when she talked about dating relationships that I was like, okay. But other than that, it's pretty good. And then the other one that we focused on for November for our book club was The Anxious Generation, and this is by Jonathan Haidt. My school district has also focused on this one. It was the book that basically inspired us to go phone free from bell to bell. So none of our middle schoolers in my entire district can have their phones on them at all during the day. Now, they didn't have them on them before in class, but no longer any sort of technology at lunch either, which is pretty cool. And this book basically talks about the difference in the play-based childhood versus the tech-based childhood and the change that's kind of happened. And I grew up, I'm solidly a millennial, probably even an elder millennial. And so just the difference in us not growing up with tech, and now I forget what the exact year was that it's the switch kind of has happened, and just the, the amount of time and the effects that technology are having on youth today. And I know for those that did read it in my book club, you know, very impactful for people that already do have kids. I really liked that it's a very data-based book, and so it can get very, very heavy in the middle. But at the end, there are chapters, you know, specifically what parents can do, what the government can do, what schools can do. And I like that he kind of broke it down. I do believe, I actually just found out today that they're coming out with like a kids version, and it's going to be a little bit more like graphic novel based, which is kind of neat. So I'll try to link that one below as well, because I want to say it comes out in January. But 2 really great reads for nonfiction. Now, one that I am almost done with. I want to say I have like 7% of the audiobook left, and has been an interesting read for me. And that is, I want to make sure they get the title right, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry. Now, I always meant to listen to this one like right after it came out. I am listening to it because Matthew Perry himself reads it. And it is such a hard listen knowing now that he has passed. But I just cannot believe all of the things that he was dealing with and the addiction throughout his life. And I didn't necessarily watch Friends when it was first on TV because I was probably a little too young at that point, but I've watched it numerous times now since, when it's been on like streaming services and stuff. And while you can tell there are definitely changes throughout his character, Chandler, you know, in all of the different seasons, I had no idea what was actually going on. And his process, his journey, his struggles, for lack of a better term, are just wild. And it really paints a light onto one person's experience with addiction. And I don't want to say by any means would it paint everyone's experience. And even as I was listening to it, I was listening on my way home today, you know, just the privilege that he had because he was making so much money, it would be so much different than the average person. But a very, very interesting story to hear him tell, excuse me, because it is his story. So those are the ones I picked up like the most recently. I did pick up a nonfiction read in September. I read The Red Bandana by Tom Rinaldi, and this, I'm gonna forget his name, Wells. His first name is Wells, I can't think of his last name, but he was this man that was remembered for saving a ton of people from one of the Twin Towers because he wore this red bandana. And so we get the whole backstory of his life and, you know, how he came to New York, how he had just applied to be a fireman and because he was working in the business sector and wasn't finding it, you know, all that intriguing. And so a really unique book to read for September 11th this year, and one I would highly recommend. And it was great on audio. So those are the books I've read like the most recently, but I have so many other nonfiction books to recommend to you as well. Another one I read, I want to say it was at the very, very beginning of this year, and I picked this one up solely because of the person that wrote it. And this is Dinner for Vampires, Life on a Cult TV Show by Bethany Joy Lenz. I was a huge, huge One Tree Hill fan. I don't think they're in here. They're probably in my storage unit, but I have all 9 seasons of One Tree Hill on DVD. Pre-streaming service. And so I loved that show. And once again, another memoir that you have no idea what someone is going on or what's going on with somebody while they're filming a TV show. She was so, like, I would have had no idea. She was basically involved in a cult that whole time. And so great listen once again, because she reads it. And all the process of, you know, I sit back and go, how could somebody join a cult? But you know, hearing it from somebody's perspective like that, you get to see like, oh, I guess you can kind of understand it. So there's that. After that, I'm going to keep moving through my list. I got my iPad down here. But if you have not picked up the book All 13, and it has a much longer title, and the author is Christina Suntorvat, I believe. It is the story of, let me just get this correct. It was the 13 men that were caught in a cave, and I just want to get it right. They were in Thailand. So if you're claustrophobic, mind that there might be a few parts in this, but the pictures in the story and the experience that these men had like stuck in the cave, and how a lot of people around the world came together to figure out how to get them out, it's a crazy story. And I think, you know, we all probably heard about it, you know, being on the news at that time, but really like getting the perspectives and, you know, the story at this, like, dare I say, root level was very interesting. And it's also written in a way that it could be shared with children, which I think is neat. And because it basically looks like a picture book, but such a very impactful story. So there's that one. After that, let me reopen this back up. Come on, there we go. Another one that, especially if you're more, you know, education minded, education based, there is Free Lunch by Rex Ogle. And he talks about his life growing up being on the free lunch program and, you know, dealing with some really tough situations financially for their family and, you know, just what it was like kind of being the poor kid in school. And I don't even remember what made me pick it up. I feel like maybe some of my coworkers were doing it for a book club, but just giving you that perspective of what that kid might feel like in that moment. Not that we don't consider that. And you know, these kids that are in your buildings and in your schools and in your communities, but just that like first person perspective is quite, I don't want to say interesting. That's not the right word, but it makes you understand it even more. I can't find the right word, but hopefully you know what I mean. After that, I shouldn't say after that, but another one, actually two books, both by Lauren Graham, are Have I Told You This Already? And Talking as Fast as I Can. Each book covers different parts of her career and her life on television. If you don't know, Lauren Graham was Lorelai Gilmore on Gilmore Girls, and she played, I can't remember what her name was, but she was in Parenthood, and she's been in a myriad of other things too. So I am by no means like extensively talking about her career, but both books, you know, I believed Have I Told You This Already is all different like short stories that she's experienced in her life, and then Talking as Fast as I Can is a little bit more like memoir-ish. She narrates them. They are fantastic. And especially if you were interested in the shows that she was a part of, you know, a lot of them have to deal with that. Plus then other things and other people that she's interacted with in her life. So really, really enjoyed those. One that I read because of my book club, but I'm really, really glad I did, was High Achiever, and this is by Tiffany Jenkins. Now, I didn't automatically recognize her name when we first picked this one up, but I do remember seeing a bunch of her videos, you know, kind of floating out on social media, and I think this was pre-TikTok, or maybe at the beginning of TikTok, because she made these videos of basically like her talking to her inner brain and all of the different parts of her inner brain. She played all of them, but I remember they were very like mental health kind of focused. But she writes this book, and she was a drug addict. Now I can't remember what her drug of choice was, but at the time she was dating a sheriff. And so basically being, you know, this very addicted person, all the while trying, you know, to hide that part of her life from this person that she was seeing that was part of law enforcement. And once again, similar to Matthew Perry's story, just very eye-opening at what the life of an addict can look like. So, and she's also very funny. So there's that. Another September 11th book that if you have not picked up, now, mind you, this comes with the caveat of it is a hard listen, and I do recommend that you listen to it because it was such a powerful audiobook, but that is The Only Plane in the Sky, and this is by Garrett M. Graff. It is an audiobook that goes through the events of 9/11, not only in New York, but all of the different locations, and you're getting basically full cast audio, some of which are the people that were actually involved. Other parts are, you know, clips from the plane or recordings that they had. And so it is a hard book to get through, especially if you have any remembrance of that time, but at the same time, so impactful, and just all the different perspectives that you're getting. So if it is one that you are willing to tackle, I highly recommend. Another one that was very, very difficult to read, only because the nature of the topic was violent. There's no other way to put it. And this is If You Tell by Greg Olson. This is another book that my book club picked up, and I don't know if I would have ever picked up this book otherwise. This is a nonfiction that reads very, very much like a mystery thriller, in the fact that I had to keep reminding myself that this actually happened. These were coming from perspectives of the girls that this happened to. And this is all about a woman who, she may actually be out of prison by now, but was very, very abusive to her family members, and they moved a lot. And she did some very, very horrific things. And like I said, to the point where I thought, it felt like I was reading, you know, some of the thrillers that I have on my shelves. And I was like, nope, this lady really, really did this. And I mean, I suppose some good fiction is based off of truth, but a wild read. And I wish I could remember her name, but obviously I'll have this link below. And actually, let me just pull this up. But horrific, just horrific. I want to say it was based in Washington. Yep, I was right. And so yeah, we're getting the three sisters, you know, telling their tale of survival because so this is Shelley Kotek, I believe. So yeah, I have put this book into the hands of many, many people, and I think they all kind of come back the same, saying that felt like I was reading a fiction. So there is that. All right. Another one that I have heard a lot of people talk about, and I wish I owned a copy of this book. And I want to say I might have read this one instead of listened to it, but it's been so long. And that was The Sun Does Shine by Anthony Ray Hinton. This is a man who was on death row as an innocent man because he was put on trial for a crime he did not commit, and convicted. He lived in, I want to say it was northern Alabama, but the South. I think it was either the 60s or the 70s, and it was one of those cases where they're like, well, you look close enough to the guy, even though they had proved he would never have been able to be in the place that he was. And so he talks about the lessons that he learned on death row, the people that he met on death row, and everything that was going through it. Now, clearly, he made it out. I do believe he was one of the people that used Bryan Stevenson as his lawyer and, you know, tried to get his justice. But just hearing him talk about the different experiences that he had and the people that he talked to, he talks about being, you know, connecting with a skinhead, which, and that's his term, not mine. But, you know, just the differences in the ideology as a Black man versus that, like what they would have. So highly, highly recommend that read. Another one that I listened to so long ago, but it is another one that I think you need to listen to. And this is Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. I know I have talked about this one before. I want to say in one of my very first videos on YouTube, I talked about my favorite audiobooks, and this made the list. Trevor Noah is hilarious. He's known for, you know, was it The Daily Show? And it has political commentary, but this book is not a political book in nature. This is all about him growing up in South Africa, having a South African mom and a white dad, and just, you know, kind of being not lost, but just, he grew up during apartheid. And so there are scenes in this book that are so funny. He was part of a dance troupe. I think I talk about that scene every time I talk about this book, but just hilarious. But you have to listen to him tell it. You know, he tells stories about his grandmother and his mother, and he's using their accents because, you know, he knows them, he grew up with them, but he had a very, very interesting life growing up in South Africa, and it is an audiobook that I will always, always remember. And then probably one of the very first nonfiction books that I read that wasn't like a required nonfiction for anything else was 3 Weeks with My Brother, and this is by Nicholas Sparks, and I believe his brother's name is Micah. I want to say Chloe at Always Booked just read this one too, and I have a whole collection of Nicholas Sparks. It's right here behind the camera. I've read almost everything he has put out. I have not read the newest one yet, but this is all about a trip that he took with his brother, basically a trip around the world. And you're hearing about the places that they visited and then, you know, times in their life. So I remember, once again, it read very fiction-like, and because it's a Nicholas Sparks, and there's not like, you know, all rainbows and butterflies, but it was probably my first like dive into nonfiction that I really hadn't picked up before unless it was required for school. So those are all the nonfiction books that I have to recommend to you. There's still a little bit of time in November if you want to pick them up, but I think they would be great reads no matter when you choose to pick them up. Do you have a favorite nonfiction book? Anything that I should be looking at or you recommend? I'm happy, audio, written ebook, doesn't matter. I just want to hear about what some of your favorites are. Feel free to leave those in the comments below. If you don't have a book to recommend, but you want to interact, let's leave. Oh gosh, what's a good nonfiction emoji? Let's do, leave some sort of a green emoji. Because if I had it right now, the Let Them Theory has an amazing green cover and it's got like some tactileness to it. So leave your favorite green emoji down below. Because like I said, I like seeing everybody interacting down there. I love hearing your comments and your thoughts, and I'm just so appreciative that you are here. So as always, if you like this video, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.